This is the Louie T Network.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to lockdown coverage, week number 1 in the National Football League. Baltimore Ravens on the road taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. A little bit of AFC North family business. If these two teams said they ain't did it, then they ain't did it. But if they did, well, that's family business. And Ravens were all about the family business, really getting nasty on the road, going into the Cincinnati Bengals house and utterly disrespecting them on the highest levels possible, surrendering no points, pitching a shutout, and daring the Cincinnati Bengals to say something. Say something. 5 turnovers forced of Andy Dalton, 4 INTs, a fumble. They were dominant in the ball game where that was that Baltimore Ravens nasty, filthy defense. And this is a unit that's going to have to carry this football team until the Ravens show some semblance of life on the offensive side of the football. We'll talk about that here in a second. But first, if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the Louie T Network for more great content in 2017 and beyond. We're changing the game over here. I want you to help us do that by simply hitting that subscribe button and becoming a member of the Louie T Network. I'm also on Twitter at In the Lab Room. Follow me there. Also on Instagram, it's with a Z _me, Louie T on IG. So go ahead and give me a follow there. And if you want to be a part of the discussion, you're watching this video live, want to have your voice heard, use the hashtag LouieTLive. I'll read your comment at the end of this video. So let's get to the proceedings this evening, shall we? Let's start with the winning team here. It's always nice to start with the wins. We let the losers worry about losing here on this program, here on this channel. So let's start with the winning team here, the Baltimore Ravens. Dominant defensive performance. We thought the Ravens would be good on defense this year. I know I watched them in the preseason, and the biggest takeaway for me with this team was that defensively, they've got it together. If they can stay relatively healthy. The biggest issue for them has been health on the defensive side of football. We've already seen a rash of injuries really ravage them offensively before the season even got underway. But defensively, that's been the issue with the Baltimore Ravens. Jimmy Smith, when he's healthy, is one of the best corners that this league has to offer. But the problem is Jimmy Smith can't stay healthy. They've had a number of guys that we could say that about. You know, Terrell Suggs, when healthy, he's still as good as you'll find as a two-way run-stopping and pass-rushing outside linebacker / defensive end in this league. But every other year, it seems like he's got a big-time knee injury. And so it's just a matter of health with this Baltimore Ravens defense. If they're healthy, they're going to be scary. They're healthy right now, and they're scary. Pitching a shutout, really harassing Andy Dalton in this football game. 5 sacks of Dalton, another 4 or 5 probably hits on Dalton. They deflected a ton of passes up front, got their hands in passing lanes, picked him off. Terrell Suggs with a deflection of a football that gets picked off. They had a linebacker drop into a beautiful coverage in zone, read the eyes of Dalton, pick and tip a slant intended for A.J. Green, and that got picked off by Brandon Carr. They made plays, did the Baltimore Ravens. They got their hands on footballs. They made the Bengals pay for mistakes. That offensive line in Cincinnati is a farce right now, and Baltimore took full advantage of every opportunity that they got to put and apply pressure on Andy Dalton, one of these quarterbacks that we've seen in this league not handle pressure very well. And he succumbed to some pressure in this game as the Baltimore Ravens defensively were able to do some things in stopping the run. And that's the key with a team like Cincinnati who struggles to protect the quarterback with a porous offensive line. You got to stop the run first so they don't have a crutch to lean on, so there isn't that element of deception, so that play action fake doesn't scare you. You got to stop the run and make Andy Dalton beat you. This isn't 2015. No one's afraid of this Cincinnati Bengals offense. Make Andy Dalton prove to you that he can get it done via the air. They've lost so many of their best offensive football players over the last 2 off seasons that they're not the same team they were 2 years ago. No one's afraid of Cincinnati offensively, and the Ravens showed exactly that by going right after Andy Dalton, stopping the run first. They gave up a big run on the first run of the game to Jeremy Hill. After that, they surrendered basically next to nothing on the ground, really stifling them. Gio Bernard did have a couple of nice little gains, but that was the extent of what they got on the ground. Then they forced Andy Dalton to have to beat them. They teed off on him, forced him into some mistakes, and had their way with the Cincinnati Bengals offensively. And so that's what you do when you're a good defense, when you're a dominant defense, when you're going to have to carry your football team. That's what you do. You create turnovers, you create short fields, you stop the other team from putting points up on the scoreboard, and you find a way to get it done. And that's what the Baltimore Ravens did in emphatic fashion on the road, disrespecting the Cincinnati Bengals in their own house, 20-0 on the defensive side of the football. Let's talk about this offense because they're a work in progress. Joe Flacco, my guy Joe, still coming back from the injury that kept him out of basically all of the preseason. And so he just wanted to come out there and play. He just wanted to be a little bit of an emotional lift for his team. You feel much better with Joe Flacco under center than you do with Ryan Mallett. So it was just one of those situations where he just needed to be on the field. I don't think he was still 100%. I don't think he was ready to be fully effective. But again, 50 to 60% of Joe Flacco is better than 100% of any other quarterback on your roster. And so he was out there. Only threw it 17 times, did throw an interception, but bottom line is Joe Flacco came out there, did what he needed to do, turned around, handed the football off a ton of times. They didn't get a ton of yards, but they got enough yards. Terrence West, wake up, Mr. West. Mr. West got it done out there, over 70 yards on the day. Also, Buck Allen out there getting bucked, and he had his fair share of touches and rushes and yards in this game. And so I think they totaled for over 140 yards on the ground. Like I said, it wasn't a gaudy average, but what it did was allowed Joe Flacco to not have to throw the football a ton, didn't expose him to any vicious hits. It kept the Cincinnati Bengals defense off balance. And again, when your defense is as dominant as they were in this game, there's no need for you to be flashy nor cute on the offensive side of the football. Just don't turn it over a bunch of times and help Cincinnati out, and you're going to win the football game. When your defense creates 5 turnovers, if you can keep the turnovers down to a minimum, you're probably going to win the football game. And that's exactly what the Baltimore Ravens did on the offensive side of football. There is a lot left to be desired offensively for this football team. We already knew that coming into the season, that this was going to be the weaker portion of their football team. But if they can get contributions from guys, and you hate to see Danny Woodhead, he just can't stay healthy for the life of me. Danny Woodhead is such a difference maker on a football team when healthy. The problem is Danny Woodhead is never, I repeat, never healthy. You already saw just in a little glimpse of what you got out of Danny Woodhead in this game. You saw just how much of a difference maker he could be for this football team. The one-hand catch on a 3rd and 11, and he gets 12. And then like 2 plays later, he's running an out route, and boom, the hamstring goes. And he's out of the game, never to return again. And who knows how long. You know, hamstrings are tricky. It could have been worse. We've seen Danny go down and it be a torn ACL multiple times in his career. So it could have been worse. It's just an hamstring, but hamstring players, we'll see how long he's out for. But they're going to need guys like him to step up. Danny Woodhead is a guy out of the backfield that I think Joe Flacco would trust with throwing the football to. He's a guy that's going to win for Flacco. They need more guys like that. Macklin with a huge catch and run on what effectively was a pick play, a beautifully executed catch and run out in space. No Cincinnati Bengal defenders within 15 yards of him as he galloped to the end zone. And that essentially was all they really needed in the game Obviously, the Cincinnati Bengals didn't score any points, so that would have been more than enough. But Joe Flacco, like I said, didn't have to do much. They still need playmakers. I still feel like that's a team void of legit playmakers. I love Macklin. I think he's a playmaker. Woodhead, when healthy, he's a playmaker. I don't think there are many more of them on this roster, despite having some guys with legit game-changing speed. I just don't see a ton of playmakers on that Baltimore Ravens roster. And so I question where the offense is going to come from. But with the defense playing the way that it did in this game, it really might not matter as long as they can find ways to just move the football and get it across midfield and into just incredible field goal range. They'll be just fine in Baltimore until they can figure some things out on the offensive side of the football. You move on to the Cincinnati Bengals, and this was just a putrid football game for them. One to forget. You want to burn this tape and just move on. A lot of mistakes. Offensive line is going to be an issue for them all season long. We talked about this in the record prediction for this division and for this particular team in the Bengals, that they struggled in the preseason. They struggled last year to protect Andy Dalton. They're struggling already. It's the same sad song for them. And this is what happens when you're cheap in free agency. You don't want to pay your stuff, and so you allow it to move on. This is the second year in a row they've allowed their homegrown talent to move on elsewhere, and they haven't got contributions out of the young guys that they drafted to replace them. And because of those losses and not getting a net gain, they're suffering offensively, and it's starting to take its toll on Andy Dalton and the rest of this offense. You can't lose Andrew Whitworth. You can't lose your best interior offensive lineman all in one offseason and replace them with guys who aren't ready to play at the level of the guys that you allowed to walk in free agency. It's just not how this league works. You can't expect things to go smoothly when you allow your best players to leave in free agency each and every single year, it seems like. And even though this team drafts well, you just don't know what you're getting. There's something to be said about proven commodities in this league. Guys that you know are going to get it done each and every single week. Those young guys, those rookies, those second-year players that you don't know about, hard to really extrapolate what they're going to do at the next level from what they did in college. And so it's a tough situation to be in because we know the Bengals have been a cheap organization over the years. They continue to be so, and it's starting to hurt them and the offensive product that they're putting on the football field. Andy Dalton was horrible in this game, but Andy Dalton was under pressure in this game. And I've already said this, most NFL quarterbacks, and this is what is the clear delineation between the upper echelon guys and the guys that are just solid NFL starting quarterbacks, the Kirk Cousins, the Andy Daltons of the world, they don't handle pressure well. Okay, those are the guys with clean pockets, can pick you apart, but you put pressure in their face, they will fold. You saw that from Dalton in this game. Pressure in his face. He made some questionable decisions, just like the one at the end of the game. No, the game's basically out of hand, and it's no longer in question nor in doubt. But that throw with Jimmy Smith right there in the hip pocket of A.J. Green on the comeback, why? It's just a guy that at some point is starting to see ghosts in the pocket, making poor decisions with the football because he simply just wants to get it out of his hands. And you go to the guys that you trust. And right now, he looks around his football team. He looks at the offensive linemen in front of him, the guys at the skill positions. There aren't a lot of familiar faces and guys that he trusts. So the ones that he does trust, Giovanni Bernard, A.J. Green, he's going to get the football to those guys because he knows what they're capable of. And that's how you get yourself in trouble in this league. And so it's unfortunate because I'm not a huge Andy Dalton guy. I was before. I'm not anymore. But I know he's better than this. And a lot of the struggles of this football team stem from the offensive line. Cedric Ogbuehi, all of the guys that have been in as replacements for the guys that have moved on to greener pastures. This team has struggled mightily, and it's unfortunate. But if they continue to play like this, not only is Marvin Lewis gone, which I think has been long overdue, but this team will miss the postseason for a second consecutive year, and things could get a lot worse before they get better in Cincinnati. We'll see what happens. It's just one game. You don't want to overreact. The Ravens are as good as it gets defensively in this league. I think they're going to be one of the better defensive teams in the league this season. So you're not going to see this type of ferocious defense every single week. But you do have to play them again. The Steelers aren't a slouch defensively. Neither are the Browns. So in your own division, you could be in some trouble. And we'll see what happens. On the defensive side of football, I didn't think it was that poor of a showing defensively. It's not like you went out and gave up 30 to the Ravens offense. You pretty much did what you had to do with no help from your offense defensively in this game. You would have liked to have seen them been better against the run in this game. But fact of the matter is, you didn't give up a ton to Joe Flacco. You did give up the big touchdown toss to Jeremy Maclin, which I just felt that was a breakdown in coverage, because after he turned the corner and got up the field on that little pick play, there was no safety help. And I know Sean Williams didn't play in the game, and that might have hurt you there. But yikes. Other than that, I thought the defense was solid. You did pick off Flacco once in this game. But all in all, not much you can do when you get no assistance from your offense whatsoever. You're on the field constantly. You're without your best, arguably your best defensive player in Vontaze Burfict. It's tough sledding for this team right now, because if you can't get help from the offense, you're asking the defense to do it on their own, and you're asking them to do it without one of their best, if not their best player. It's going to be tough for this Bengals team, but the defense is going to keep them in ball games, and they're going to give them opportunities to win. And so from that standpoint, I didn't think it was that porous of a showing. But once again, I don't think this is a defense that's good enough to win games by themselves. I think they need contributions from the offense. I don't think this is a take the football away and score, pick six type of offense, force a fumble, scoop and score type of defense, I don't think they're going to go out and put up points on the scoreboard themselves or create short fields for their offense to get easy scoring opportunities. I think this is a bend but don't break type of defense, which you saw in this game. They allowed Baltimore to move the football but not necessarily punch it into the end zone a ton of times. So we'll see. Again, I don't want to make too much of it. It's week one. Things happen in week one. The defense is always ahead of the offense. So we'll see what happens with both of these teams moving forward. But to go on the road, to blank a team that traditionally has been outstanding at home. Hell, the Ravens haven't won since the 2011-2012 season in Cincinnati, and they not only go in there and win, but blank them, shut them out, smack them around in their own house, raid their fridge, eat all of their snacks, disrespect their house. It's how you do it. It's family business in the most disrespectful way possible. And I love every second of it. Ravens get it done 20-0 over the Cincinnati Bengals. Bengals leave this game 0-1 and got a short turnaround Thursday night versus the Houston Texans. You're going to have to fix some things, and you're going to have to fix some things fast, because they're pissed off because of what happened to them at home, just like you. And so both teams are pissed off because they got mopped in their own crib, and now you probably got to deal with Deshaun Watson. So good luck with that. You're going to need it. He's a young quarterback. Hopefully you can turn him over a couple of times, turn those into some scoring opportunities, and get your first dub of the season. We'll see. Quick turnaround Thursday Night Football. Bart Scott. Can't wait. Ravens leave the game 1-0. More importantly, 1-0 with a road victory in the division. Let's get to some comments and get out of here. See what we got. Andrew Kim says, the way the defense just suffocated Dalton, limiting Green and Eifert, and stuffing the run for the most part was so good to see. It was definitely a dominating performance, one that I didn't expect. I expected them to go out there and have a good showing, but not be suffocating, as my man AK just put it. Not be suffocating to the point where they didn't score a single point at home. Of course, that interception in the end zone was huge, but it doesn't matter. They were suffocating. C.J. Mosley with a great play in the end zone. That was a hell of a pick to go up, climb the ladder, extend away from the frame, and pluck that football out of the end zone, out of the air. That's gorgeous. That's what great defenses do. And that was outstanding. Andrew Kim also says the run game was consistent and better than expected. They knew they had to help Flacco, so they really committed to the run. And with Woodhead injured, Langford should get promoted. And I think you'll probably see that because I expect Woodhead to be out for at least 2 to 4 weeks with that hamstring injury. And with him having such a detailed and long injury history, you want him to be 100% before you send him back out on the field, because you could risk him tearing his hamstring if you send him back out there. That's just the way it goes with Danny Woodhead. So I would expect a guy like Langford to get promoted and get an opportunity to show what he is capable of on this Ravens roster. And I agree with you. The run game was a pleasant surprise because it was very consistent, something that they lacked last season. And they actually were able to not have to rely on Flacco, only allowing him to throw it 17 times, which I thought that's what they drew up. That's the way they wanted it to go. And I don't know if they expected it to go that way, but that's what they wanted. They didn't want to put Flacco in harm's way, and they didn't have to because they were able to run the football with, like you said, very consistent run game. And that really helped them get out of this game basically unscathed at the quarterback position. Andrew Kim says, next week against the Browns, I think the defense will pressure Kaiser and Flacco will take some shots next week with Wallace and Perriman and Macklin more involved. We'll see. I think they want to bring Flacco along slowly. And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't know if you watched that Pittsburgh Browns game. The Browns defense, they ain't no joke. Just like your defense, not to be played with, that Browns defense, they're hitting folks, okay? They were all over Ben's ass in that football game. So if you think you're just going to take some shots down the field because it's the Browns, you might want to be careful. You might want to try to establish the run like you did last week and see if you can minimize the amount of shots that Flacco's taking, because this Browns defense is hungry. They're young. They're ferocious. And they're getting after people. And that should be a fun game. That's going to be a physical affair. I can tell you that right now. It wouldn't shock me if it's a very low-scoring 13-10 type of physical affair. We will see. Andrew Kim also says, I know 2 out of the 4 interceptions were tipped, but the awareness of the D-line and the amount of pressure they were getting was ridiculous. Absolutely. That interception that Brandon Carr got, that tip by the linebacker, come on, man. That wasn't a bad decision by Dalton there. Clean pocket on that particular play. A.J. Green was going to be open for that slant, and he just got in the passing lane, got his long-ass arms up, tipped the football, and Carr was the recipient of a great defensive play by the linebacker dropping there. I mean, sometimes the defense just wins. And that was one of those situations where the defense won. And so, yeah, the tip passes were outstanding. The amount of pressure was what we expected because Cincinnati's offensive line has been so bad this year. So it didn't shock me. What shocked me was they weren't able to muster any points in the game. Just none. No semblance of they had a couple of drives in there that looked promising. Of course, the one that was picked off in the end zone by C.J. Mosley. But for the most part, it was just surprising that they couldn't muster any offense and score points. I just thought they had more weaponry offensively than what was displayed. And I guess some of that has to be some credit has to be given to the Ravens defensively for getting after Dalton to the point where they didn't feel comfortable getting the football to some of these playmakers out in space. Slip Ammo says, I told you, Lou. I told you the Bengals O-line is hot garbage. Easily will finish worse in the league. They're going to get Dalton hurt. And my man Slip has been telling me about this offensive line all preseason. I told him, I believe you. I've seen them struggle. We saw them struggle last year. And now it's being magnified because your best offensive linemen from the year previous, they're no longer there. Well, you know, one's in Cleveland and the other's in Los Angeles. And so now those guys have no choice but to play. And now it's showing that much more. It could be a lot of trouble for them. Brandon Williams says, I told you that this Ravens defense will be top 5 this year. They look legit. And right now, I'd say yes. I'd agree with that assessment that they'd be a top 5 defense for sure. Slip Ammo says, very cheap ownership, Lou. I agree. We need to let some players go next season. Use that cap to pick up some free agent O-linemen and then draft some early round offensive linemen as well. It's been a traditionally cheap and frugal front office in Cincinnati. That's no secret. And so there are, like Andrew Whitworth, I get it. I'd like to have seen you keep him, but he's up there in age. What is he, 33, 34 years old? I mean, he doesn't have but so much football left. But the guard, I would have loved to have seen. He was a young um, Kevin Zeitler. He was a young, good guard in this league. There was no reason to let him walk. Pay him his money, keep him, and give Andy Dalton a pocket to step up in. But it is what it is. Tyler Rodriguez says, who has the worst O-line, Cincinnati Giants or the Seahawks? If I had to guess, I'd say that the Seahawks probably have the worst group. No, you know what? Seahawks just have issues at the tackle positions. Their interior offensive line isn't actually that bad. Their problems are on the tackle, on the edges with the tackle position. Cincinnati, I think they've got leaks all over their offensive line. So I'd say Cincinnati probably be number one. Seahawks too. The Giants' offensive line is bad, but it's not horrendous all the way across the board. So I think it's Cincinnati 1, Seattle 2, and then the Giants 3. Cloud says, didn't see this game. Heard the O-line was bad. How many times did he get sacked? Dalton was sacked 5 times. He was hit another 4 or 5 times in this game. They deflected about 6 of his passes, 8 overall pass deflections. The D-line was in his face constantly. He was not comfortable at all in this game, and it showed in his performance. Cloud also says, who do you have winning the Minnesota-New Orleans game? I've got both home teams for Monday night, Minnesota and Denver. Cloud says, did John Ross play? I don't believe he did. I think he injured himself. I could be wrong, but I believe he injured himself, and that's part of the problem with John Ross is he's a very fragile player, high-maintenance guy. Anytime you got these big speedsters or these little speedsters, these guys with these really tight twitched fibers, they're high-maintenance athletes, and I'm not sure if he played or not, but I don't think he did. Slip Ammo says, we need to stop this since he has weapons narrative. Green, Eifert, Gio, that's it right now. Ross will be here around week 3, so no, he didn't play. I thought he injured himself late in the preseason, but he's a number 4 on the wide receiver depth chart right now. And that's one of the narratives that you hear from people who don't actually watch the team. I thought that they had more weapons, the ones that you named in Eifert, Green, and Gio, and I was ready to also sprinkle in the rookie Joe Mixon into that because I thought he had some dynamic playmaking ability out in space, some screen game, maybe a couple of draws, ways you get him the football. He was going to be dynamic, but I didn't see much of him as a factor in this game, so maybe I spoke too soon on him. But, look, this team continues to lose weapons each and every single year, and I still think they haven't recovered from 2 years ago when they allowed Mohamed Sanu, check, 1-2, 1-2. Guess who? Mohamed Sanu and Marvin Jones Jr. to walk a couple of years ago. And so we'll see. Slip says, and Marvin isn't getting Mixon enough touches, still stubbornly giving the rock to Hill. I think he just wants to keep Hill appeased because he's one of those guys that will vocally be upset if he doesn't get the rock. Remember how he reacted when they drafted Joe Mixon. I'm still the number 1 running back. I'm the best running back on his team. He's an ass, and I think Marvin knows that. And so Marvin wants to keep the peace in the locker room. And so I think that's why he's still getting Jeremy Hill touches as much as he is. He's got to realize that Joe Mixon is a more dynamic back there and that Joe Mixon needs to touch the rock a little bit more. But we will see. In any event, that was the last comment, and so that's going to do it for this breakdown. If it happens in the National Football League, whether big or small, we cover it all here on the Louie T Network. Continue to break down coverage all day long here on Lockdown Coverage. Your man Louie T's got you covered, just like I got the rest of the league covered like a blanket. Come back and join me, man. I got more football to break down, including Jets and Bills. That's coming at you next, as well as Falcons and Bears. Oh, my. Got some more games to look at. I'll be back a little bit later on. I'll see you then. Have a good one.